my gosh, it was so obvious once I cut it out. And then once you tune into yourself, you kind of start to realize, oh, I feel better without that crap. You use it, there's less, but then as soon as you take it away, it comes back. That is not an effective product.
If you've heard of the Longevity Bible Lifespan by Professor David Sinclair, you know that living well is more important than just living long. In fact, this show is dedicated to the science of beauty, wellness, and longevity. That's why I'm so thrilled to partner with Melrose Future Lab for Season 9 of the Ageless Radiance Club podcast. Future Lab is Australia's first supplement range focused on extending not just your lifespan, but your health span. Available exclusively at Chemist Warehouse, these affordable and science-backed supplements are the key to aging well. Welcome to another episode, and today I have an amazing guest. Today I'm joined by Alexx Stuart, a true innovator in the low tox movement. Starting her journey with the Low Tox Life blog in 2009, Alexx has since become a 12-time best-selling author with books like Low Tox Life and Low Tox Food. Through her blog, top-rated podcast, and 10 transformative courses, she's empowered millions to create healthier, more sustainable lives. In our conversation today, Alexx shares her expertise on minimising toxic load to support cellular health and long-term vitality, making the low tox life accessible and achievable. We explore her holistic approach to wellness and beauty, from embracing real food and ditching harmful chemicals to building toxin-free environments for true inside-out health. Alexx also opens up about her own journey with mold toxicity and its far-reaching impact on wellness and crucial steps to protect our health and longevity against unseen environmental hazards. Get ready to uncover actionable insights into reducing toxins and optimizing your health on a very special episode of Ageless Radiance Club. How wonderful to have my friend Alexx Stuart on the show today. How are you?
I'm great, Bahar, and it is wonderful to be here, old friend. There are some people who weave in and out of your life over literally decades, and you are one of those people for me. So it's great to be here.
You are such an impressive woman. Like, what you have achieved in the 20 plus years that I've known you is quite extraordinary. Your low tox portal and empire has changed the lives of so many people. And I actually can't believe we haven't talked to you before on the show. To have a conversation about longevity and cellular wellness without talking about toxic load on the body, on the mind, in your environment seems kind of remiss of me. So I'm absolutely honored and delighted to have your expertise to share with my listeners today.
Oh, thank you. I think food is often a bit of a gateway. And then for women, the beauty piece is often the next gateway, because it's like, well, I'm looking at my hormones and maybe that's why my skin's not so great. And then what products am I using? And, but we often don't actually think of toxic load. It tends to be that I've tried everything and nothing has worked so far. I need to see someone different. I need to do something different. And then toxic load kind of creeps in through, an Instagram account or your naturopath. But I was really grateful to learn about it early-ish in my life. After the prestige beauty years, that's for sure, after hospitality, active hospitality and working night shifts and all that jazz. But early enough before my son, which was great. And frankly, I was just shocked at how little we get just naturally taught through school systems, university, through our own doctors. And so I thought, this can feel scary, but I'm a teacher, trainer, motivator, educator by trade. And I reckon I want to jump in here and help people not feel so scared about this as we decide to prioritize what we want to swap out and focus on as positive changes for us, for the planet. Yeah.
You mentioned that you're an educator, and I do love this about you, and I've known this about you for such a long time. And I think our kids are maybe 2 years apart, maybe 18 months apart.
They are. Yeah.
But, your story in Low Tox Life really kicked into high gear from being curious about it to being definitive about it when you were pregnant.
Mm.
No, when you were no, your son was born, right? And you were shopping, you were starting to get him on solids, I want to say.
Yeah, there was that in the food piece. So, going down the aisles and thinking, what's the best choice here? But just before then, it was actually the baby shower. So I'd done all this work on my food because I had found a naturopath after becoming antibiotic resistant to strep throat drugs. And I was like, okay, well, so what do I do? I have tonsillitis permanently now? Like, how's that going to work? And a naturopath literally saved my life, got me well. She was amazing. And she also helped me identify a food sensitivity that seemed to be quite permanent and also seemed to be pretty well linked to getting tonsillitis. Doesn't mean that gluten's bad for everybody. I am not one of those people who's going to try and make blanket statements because I simply don't believe them to be true. But for me, oh my gosh, it was so obvious once I cut it out and then tried to bring it back in again, boom, tonsillitis. But it was the journey of having to go gluten free that made me realize A, how many packaged foods had gluten at the time, but B, how complicated the ingredients lists were that I had literally never looked at in my life. And I was 28, 29 at the time. And, you just hydrolyze vegetable protein and numbers and this, and not all numbers are
And
evil.
every source,
I
every
know.
You know what's really interesting is I just had the Ageless Radiance Club event in Sydney a month ago, and
Mm.
we did this whole session on reading beauty packaging and being able
Oh,
to decipher, the
mm.
formulation. And it was really Science 101. And I always like to say, above all other things, I am a citizen scientist. I'm the daughter of a scientist. I am a citizen scientist. I love evidence-based uh, information. I love speaking to experts. And, before we recorded, I was saying to you, I've recorded with 200 plus doctors, and you came back and said, well, I've recorded with 400 plus.
I wasn't trying to one up you.
No, and I think,
But yeah,
but
it's true.
I want to highlight that because neither you nor I are experts, aside from the fact that we're deeply, deeply interested in this information.
Mm.
But we do get our source material from research and from
Of
science
course.
and
Yeah.
from
I mean, there's enough
evidence.
fake news on the internet. Like, we don't need to be adding to that. When the published papers exist, they're there, we know. And then once you tune into yourself, you kind of start to realize, oh, I feel better without that crap. Either whether it's in your mouth for food or on your skin for beauty. And I remember back in my LVMH days when I represented one of the beautiful French houses of cosmetics, and I was so proud. And going to those training sessions in France, but also delivering training sessions here in Australia, we would always focus, and you would totally know this,
I
the
understand.
rare Aegean algae that was going to diminish our wrinkles, or the gold, 24 karat gold flecks that were through the primer gel, all the things. That was what we talked about, and that was what we learnt about. But we didn't talk about any of the chemicals that then took up 2/3 of the ingredient list on the packaging. And so when I had my baby shower and when I'd been through that whole let's clean up the food, let's keep it simple, let's learn how to cook properly thing in my late 20s, here I am in my early 30s, pregnant. People give you all the lovely, well meaning gifts. And I'm like, well, I'm good at reading food labels. Let's check out what's in this stuff. And I was horrified. I was like, hold on. So I've just looked this up. And, one of the best things you can do is ingredient name on Google now, much easier than 15 years ago when I started doing it. But you put the ingredient name in Google, toxicity, and study, and you see if anything comes up. And then, you get better and better at reading and going, oh, well, that was a study of 12 people and or that was an animal study and no one else has studied it. So that's not great science, not very heavy in its influence. But then you see some that are really influential, big studies, studying a cohort of factory workers in fragrance, making factories and things. That kind of stuff's more interesting and more valid. And I was starting to find studies like this, and I thought, wow, I'm seeing two things emerge. Well, three. Sometimes the ingredients seem to be disruptive of our hormones, like either fiddle with them, mimic them, block them, something in the hormone situation. Number two, potential carcinogens, so ingredients that with a high enough amount of exposure could potentially contribute to cancer. And number 3, irritating. And the thing that really got me on the irritation preservative front was some of these products were in dermatology approved products. And I was like, okay, this makes no sense. So I reached out to a few people, environmental scientists, professors like Mark Cohen down at RMIT in Melbourne, who were working on environmental toxins and toxins in food and beauty. And I started interviewing them. I was like, okay, this is terrible, but I'm a teacher, trainer, motivator. As you know, I've said it. So I can't just sit with information and I don't do the whole wallow and overwhelm paralysis. Everything's over. What have I been doing? I've been killing myself. I'm going to kill my baby. Like, no, of course not. That's not helpful. And I knew that a positive spin could be put on learning about this, which was to say, let's start picking up daily items, learning what's in them in their mainstream form, which, by the way, is far better today than it was 15, 20 years ago. So that's the good news.
And your advice how to discover.
And then, let's just look at some brands that are doing better by people, by planet. And so I started that. And that's really what Low Tox Life was about at the start.
Can I circle back to something that you said, which I really found interesting? We're not just talking about the big C here. We're talking about the impact of toxic load, whether it be through food, environment, through what we put in and on our bodies. And you talked about irritation being one of them. And one of the other things that I know that you're very passionate about and you have a course on is how a high toxic load can trigger severe inflammation. And that can present as skin issues. It can present as gut health issues. It can present as brain fog, all sorts of, organ and lifestyle impacts. So I like that because I think that your journey of discovering or reducing the toxic load in your life doesn't have to start if you're frightened of or encountering a big disease state. It can actually be simply to make life more comfortable. And I think that's a great place to start. Like you were saying, not getting tonsillitis every cold. That makes life more comfortable. It makes life better. Not feeling like you're going to throw up if you eat certain foods or eat in the wrong order. That makes life more comfortable. Not feeling itchy and scratchy after you wear something or enter a space where there's a fragrance being pumped into the air. So I do like that. And I'm wondering if you could share with us some of the big unseen toxic loads that are in and around all of us that we may not know are really impacting our wellness, our energy, our longevity.
Okay. So I think I'm going to pick 3 and then I'm going to start with 1 and then we can work through and you can ask me questions along the way. Perfect. So here are the 3. Number 1, fragrance, synthetic fragrance. It's big, it's everywhere, it's through multiple categories of products, it's at home, it's at work, it's on holidays, it's everywhere. So that's a big one. Number 2, mold in our homes. A lot of people don't realize that mold can produce significant health impacts, that often you've been dealing with 6 or 7 diagnoses, but if you actually sort out your building, you can find that a lot of your health problems start to ease, if not disappear in some cases. Number 3, ultra-processed food. And ultra-processed food is a double-edged sword. Number 1, obviously it's highly complex, harder for our bodies to figure out what to do with, and often contains a whole bunch of added man-made ingredients that our biology just doesn't understand, but also what it comes packaged in, which is often soft plastics, which leads me straight back to fragrance, because those two things have something in common, which is the phthalate family of chemicals, PHTH, THALATES for the nerds who like looking things up like me. And phthalates are a plasticizer. Now, in plastics and food packaging, it's the soft plastics that are covering our chips, our crackers, our organic bone broth or passata even, like soft, mushy plastics. You really want to be minimizing those from your foods. But in fragrance land, it's the I kiss my gym buddy bye after our yoga class in the morning, and she happens to be wearing a synthetically fragranced 48-hour protection deodorant and her perfume. And that night, I've done the school pickup, I've gone to work, I've taken the kids to soccer practice, I've come home, and a little breeze goes past me as I get out of the car, and I can smell my friend from 12 hours ago after yoga as if we had just kissed and hugged goodbye after the yoga class. So that plasticizer, that stickiness of phthalates, was added to fragrances to provide the success picture of long-lasting fragrance. Now, I mean, I remember running the fragrance counter at downtown duty-free Strand Arcade when I was 18 years old. And we loved being able to say, and it's a beautiful fragrance and it'll stay with you all day. You don't need to reapply. That was one of the features and benefits of a lot of, of a lot of fragrances.
And in most categories, what you were saying is so true, because there's so many different ways to wear fragrance, but there's so many different ways to encounter fragrance. And never before have we top-to-toed fragrance like we have now. There's dry shampoo, there's a 6-step hair. There's the concept of an everything shower, where basically you toxic load your body to, while it's naked, to the nth degree by putting everything on it. You're doing your hair, you're doing your hair mask, you're doing a hair scrub, you're doing a body scrub, you're doing lotions, you're doing shower gels, everything. And then you do cream layering, fragrance layering, deodorant layering, and wow.
And then you're in your bathroom with the toilet duck and with the air freshener and with the scented reeds.
And candles.
The hand wash, and even in toothpaste, some toothpastes still have it. So like what once was, I'm going to put my One Precious perfume on, which I'm going to hazard a guess was probably nowhere near as bad, especially if you put it on your clothes and not on your bare skin, as you say, this fragrance maxing that we're doing these days. My son was telling me the girls at school, because he goes to a co-ed school, the girls talk about fragrance maxing. And that's when, as you say, like you're layering it. You want your bath gel to smell like the soap, to smell like the perfume, so it's all layering.
Remember we sold fragrance layering?
Yeah.
I have a great update to share from Melrose Future Lab. Hormonal health is a vital hallmark of aging and longevity. And whether you're navigating perimenopause or menopause, Melrose Future Lab's new ultra-complex supplements are here to support you. Backed by clinical research and using advanced technology for effective absorption, these formulations are designed to provide relief through every phase. Find them exclusively at Chemist Warehouse. Always read the label and follow the directions for use. I worked for Givenchy. That was my job while I was at university, and my layering technique, I know it like if I close my eyes, I could tell you exactly what order. And I'm horrified and shocked that the key to a good French layering process was talc, and God, now know what a disaster that is.
Yeah.
And as you said, during a baby shower, if you look at the things that are coming through to you, I remember I was super vigilant with Lily too. That was the only time in my life I really cared about toxic loading. I changed my diet throughout my pregnancy. I was so careful about what I ate because it was more about Lily, not about me.
Yeah.
And then when she was born at Mater Hospital, and I took all my own bathing products in for her. It was jojoba oil, which I would never do. Like I'm a maximalist, and I'm sure I'm 80% toxic chemicals most of the time. But truly for Lily, I had this other part of my brain that kicked into gear.
Mm,
And I am still concerned about, especially, through puberty and,
yeah.
she went through puberty when I went through menopause. But I
Mm,
think it's really interesting because, all of those endocrine disruptors, all of those mood disruptors, sleep disruptors, they
mm.
matter whether you're in puberty or in menopause, right?
I know. And isn't it cruel that they make us go through that with our kids roughly at the same time?
Oh, it was fun
At
in
least we
our
can all be basket cases together. That's
No, it was
what
good
I
fun in
think.
our neighborhood, definitely. Now, the
Yeah.
second thing that, the second bombardment that you
Mm.
spoke about, um, can you share more about how we encounter that and ways that we could potentially minimize?
Yeah, of course. So mold is a part of our lives. Mold is fungi. It's fungi, like lots of different species. There are thousands and thousands of different species. And there's, I want you to think about it like you think about gut bugs. Most people know that E. coli, for example, in a small population, sitting among a whole bunch of different gut bugs, actually serves a useful purpose. But if it takes over, it's a disaster. And water damage molds, so the particular species that thrive when you've had a leak or a flood or those sorts of situations, or like a lot of humidity that you haven't managed through your home, these water damage molds, if not kept in check and minimized and are allowed to proliferate and grow, can cause, oh my gosh, Bahar, it's so many problems. I wouldn't have believed it unless I had actually experienced the full impact of it myself when we were living in a beautiful big Art Deco apartment. Nothing looked bad. There was a big rainstorm when we first moved in, but the landlord was all over it. And we thought, this is great. You know, they've repainted, they've replaced a couple of tiles, we're sorted. But when there's an event like that, it just starts growing in the walls. You know, paint does not fix moisture. And I want anyone who's got an investment property and their own home to be listening to this, because you are significantly impairing the ROI of your investments if you just paint over stuff and just get it rented out again or move on and think, oh, the kids will be fine. It's just a bit of mold. We've got to stop thinking mold is just this annoying thing that pops up every now and then and actually address it as an environmental toxin, which once you can see it and smell it in your home, it 100% has crossed into that. This is a problem. And so,
Let me just interject here because I have had this experience with property before.
mm,
And my own lived experience on three different occasions is that mold management is a
mm,
dark art
mm.
and it is an opaque area.
And it's
There,
very contested and thought about as to what the right way is. There's no regulation. So you really are on a wing and a prayer based on who
yes,
you engage.
yes. And I was wondering if one of the things I like to do on the show is to give people language and resources to self-advocate. So
Mm,
if you're listening to this or watching this now and you go, yep, I've got mold, or yes, I used to rent a place that had mold and the landlord didn't know what to do, or as you said, painted over it, or I've got mold on my clothes in the back room where I keep the spare coats.
mm,
What is the right approach if we've talked about what the wrong approach is? Because it can be a really expensive and
yeah.
really dark rabbit hole to go down. So what, in your experience, from your contacts, from all of the work that you do, is a good way
Mm.
to start and escalate?
Gosh. Okay. So I have, and I'll send it to you so that you can share it with the listeners, a post that is an aggregated post of everything I've ever done on mold, which, as someone who has moved 9 times in the past 7 or 8 years, and experienced horrific health effects that I won't go into here. It's just too much of a saga, and so I want to keep to being solution focused rather than telling my story. But my whole story, every podcast I've done with every doctor, every building biologist, every professional mold cleaning company, they're all in the one page. And so it's called So You Think You've Got Mold. So if you literally whip out your phone right now and you go Low Tox Life, So You Think You've Got Mold in your Google bar, it'll come straight up.
That is the most wonderful thing. That's exactly what I'm after, because I think it affects, like, and we've talked about this before. I remember when you first got really unwell. I think it was the first or second house that you lived in.
Yeah,
It was bad. I remember,
it was
like, it was
so bad.
terrible.
Yeah.
And then didn't you go from one house to another, and they both had terrible mold, and it was like you were running to stand still.
Yeah, yeah. And when I did the math on it, when I was doing a TED talk on mold a couple of years ago, the first 2 years that I became really sick, and no one knew what it was because it was hidden mold. Like, a lot of people think you've got a mold problem, it's got to be like a current affair kind of black walls and like that really sensationalized view of it. But for me, it wasn't. Like, yeah, it was an older building, and sure, you could maybe smell a bit of mustiness in the common areas, but our apartment itself was not a moldy apartment. It was all in the walls, hidden. And I think I came down with about 36 different neurological, cardiac, musculoskeletal symptoms. It was crazy. It was actually crazy. And it made me realize how crazy it is that such a known hazard. I mean, you wouldn't go put anyone you love in a room with mold and say, go live here. You wouldn't do it. You know enough to know that that wouldn't be cool.
And you
yet,
also would never eat moldy food. So we throw it. We immediately.
Exactly.
So we know not to ingest it, not to have it near us, that it will make us sick. And yet you're right. We live with it. We often live with it and say, oh, yeah, it's typical. I live near the water in Sydney. Sydney's full of mold. All these old places don't have great ventilation.
Yeah.
I'll put damp
So
in the.
I think I saw neurologists, cardiologists, 4 different naturopaths, 4 different doctors, integrative doctors, every therapy you could possibly. Oh, it's obviously your brain. It's something psychosomatic here. So let's do trauma work. I've got news. I feel great when I'm in a non-moldy building. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah.
And so I spent 120 grand getting to diagnosis point.
That's wild.
No word of a lie. That was all of our savings, ironically, that we were about to use to spend on a deposit. And once I started connecting with people, Bahar, I realized, oh my gosh, this isn't some weird case. I'm not even special. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of people who lose everything because they are sick from mold, and it's heartbreaking. So I've had to advocate for it. You've got to make meaning of the crap that happens to you in your life. I'm not saying it gets sent to you for a reason, but I am saying if the shit hits the fan, sorry to swear, but you then have a choice to make meaning of it and make a contribution once you know what you know. And that's the only way I've been able to move through and forward, is at least knowing a few people get to their answers faster, they save cash, they find good remediators, like all that jazz.
Yeah, it's wonderful to learn from your lived experience. I have a question regarding mold, which has come up a little bit in the news or, in health conscious kind of circles, and that is how much mold accumulates in water bottles. And so, we're trying to do the right thing and recycle.
Or in the fridge water filter systems. Ew, that's a really bad one.
Correct.
Yeah.
But also, water bottles are status symbols at the moment. Anyone who's got a child between 10 and 16 will know that we've spent hundreds of dollars on Frank Green, on Stanley's.
God bless late stage capitalism. It's wild out there with the water bottle trends. Yeah.
Exactly. But they're filthy. They're really filthy. And we're creating a problem for ourselves. How bad is ingested mold versus, environmental mold? Is it less horrific?
It's a different form of ingestion. So environmental mold, it'll go through your eyes, your nose, your lungs, and then it'll get into your bloodstream that way. Super fun. But then the stuff that you ingest, that goes through your digestive tract. If you've got leaky gut, that's probably not a great, because then it'll seep through the junctions. But I don't believe it to be as bad, because you can actually mop it up with binders pretty successfully, like something even like activated charcoal. Chat to your practitioner, see if it might be right for
Have you ever
you.
had activated charcoal for a hangover?
Well, yeah,
Yeah, you
for
remember?
like excess farting, hangovers, like
Did you live in
it's
Paris?
yeah,
Did you ever live in Paris? I
it's
lived in Paris, and everyone takes activated
yeah,
charcoal.
it's
I think
known to be a great mop up for lots of different things. Vets use it in practice so commonly for poisoning, because dogs eat all sorts of things, same with cats. So it's very good for food poisoning, for all sorts of things. And I think this beautiful, like years old remedy is also really good for accidentally ingesting mold. So if you and your kid realize through the silicone straws and everything that there's been mold there, it's pretty safe. I mean, do your own research, but it's a very safe remedy. Just take it away, of course, from any medications, because it is a mop up. So you don't want it to be mopping up anything that you're prescribed by your doctor. But
yeah.
it's like amazing for mold ingestion through
I
food or
forgot
drink
about
bottles.
activated charcoal. It's such
It's
a
pretty
goodie.
good.
It's a
Mm,
goodie. Oh, I
mm.
like that. Now, what was our third one? Plastic. No, it's
Plastic,
plastic.
well, ultra processed food. But can I
Ultra
just give
processed.
people one mold tip before we move on to
Yes,
that,
yes.
which is prevention. So the number one DM I get around the topic of mold is, how can I clean mold off? How can I clean mold off my grout, my silicone,
Dress.
my boots, my dress? The number one thing I reply is, unfortunately, that thing's done. Because once it's in a soft furnishing of any kind, I'm sorry, like if you find it on your bed or in a doona, or it's very, very hard to kill mold. You always want to be removing it. So get your tradie, replace the grout and silicone that has been affected, and from that day on, you get a dehumidifier. So people who've got homes that have ducting, air conditioning ducting, they take a lot of moisture out of the air, but split systems don't. And a lot of homes have split systems for air conditioning. And then a bunch of homes don't have any kind of air conditioning. They're using fans and heaters. So for those last two categories, having a dehumidifier or two and rotating them through your home when it's raining, or let's just say your dishwasher sprung a leak and the tradie can't get to you for 2 days, having it at hand so you can keep the area dry and stop mold from growing, amazing. And there's this thing called a climate gauge, which you can get, or a hygrometer, and it tells you the indoor humidity percentage.
Oh
And
my God, a
all,
friend of mine once gifted me with one because I wouldn't leave the house if the weather was humid, because my hair would go frizzy. So he bought me one, and he had it just outside my door. This is like 20 years ago. And it was a joke, but it really saved my bacon, because I would take it to places. This is before I lived in my own house. And I would know, like, if I had a mold issue or if I had a damp issue.
yeah. So if it's over 60% and it's over 60% for a few days, that's it. Mold can start to grow. All it needs is a bit of food, which is your dust, your coat, your shoes, a mattress, cushions, anything it can start eating and decomposing. That is fungi's job. And so if you can short circuit that process by regularly dehumidifying, so you don't need to have them on all the time, but think about it as every 2-3 days, if it's raining, or if it's like Sydney, February, March kind of time when it's super humid. Brilliant. It's the best thing you can do. People wait until they have an event to get dehumidifiers, and then they're all out of stock. Because if there's a flood, you can bet thousands of people are looking for dehumidifiers all of a sudden. I say, get one now. Chuck a small dehumidifier, like a 16-litre kind of compact dehumidifier, on after everybody's had their showers at night, and just dry the bathroom out, and you will never have to clean mold out of your bathroom again. And that in itself is great for health, but also really great because who likes cleaning mold? And by the way, nothing works as a solution
was going to
anyway.
ask you, I was going to ask you, is like the heavy duty chemicals of mold cleaners
Mm.
putting bad after bad? Like
Yeah.
they
And
always
then
get,
you're harming your lungs in the process. Most people
yeah.
get headaches. There's a reason why being a cleaner is one of the most hazardous jobs on the planet, and it's using those harsh chemicals. So you get a bleaching effect, but there's a lot of moisture in bleach and chlorine products, and that moisture can still be food for mold in the background. And it's kind of like cockroach baits. You use it, there's less, but then as soon as you take it away, it comes back. That is not an effective product. That would never fly in any other situation, and yet we let it fly with mold. So I say if we dehumidify, then we prevent rather than having to deal with mold.
Now, I know we weren't going to go down the rabbit hole of terrifying headlines, but I feel compelled to ask you this.
Mm,
In your research, I know about your own lived experience, but in your research and in speaking to mold informed health practitioners,
mm.
how dangerous is mold? Like, really, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much of a priority should it be is as part of our longevity and cellular wellness plan? Because
It's oh,
we talk about this
mm.
all the time on the show, and it seems to me we're ignoring the iceberg ahead.
So it depends on the species. But a mold like Stachybotrys, which is the one that people know as black mold,
Yes,
has multiple studies that point to it being carcinogenic.
yes,
A mold like Chitomium has multiple studies pointing towards it being neurotoxic.
yes.
Stachybotrys as well is actually neurotoxic, but Chitomium is like gnarly. There's things that link it to Parkinson's, ALS, a whole bunch of things, MS. There are people who get diagnosed with certain neurodegenerative conditions that if it is found that it was actually a moldy house and they leave, a lot of their symptoms go away, if not the diagnosis altogether. So there's now this thinking that some people are being incorrectly diagnosed with neurodegenerative problems or psychiatric conditions that are living in a seriously unhealthy home with high levels of water damage species of mold. And it's all right there in scientific literature. I'm not sort of like, I wouldn't be saying this if it wasn't true. You have things like aspergillus, and that can be really damaging to the lungs and give people permanent lung weakness. I could go on. So it really is just a handful of species. You don't have to worry if you see a bit of green on your lemon or a little bit of fuzz in the jam that you've left in the fridge for too long. Like, do not panic every time you see mold. In places it's actually quite normal and common for it to grow. But do start to be on the front foot if you see bubbling paint on your walls or staining or tea coloured staining and think, what's that patch? I wonder if there's a crack in one of our tiles. Like, don't wait. Do not wait is the message, because water damage molds are serious and they will cause light problems for people with great immune systems, simple things that you'd think, oh, that's annoying, like I'm congested when I wake up, or sinusitis again, or, that kind of stuff. But then at the extreme level, twitching, tremoring, arrhythmias, palpitations, exacerbation of hormonal conditions, because mold is mycoestrogenic. So for us ladies in our midlife, it can be a real disaster to layer mold exposure, as I know, on top of perimenopause and menopause. So I would say front foot. The number one thing you need to do the week that your tap seems to break, or the week that you notice there's some gaps in your grout all of a sudden, and so water might be getting back there, don't go for the mani-pedi this week if the choice is mani-pedi or tradie in your budget. Choose tradie every time and get that sorted, because you don't want to deal with water damage. It's expensive the longer you leave it as well, to your health and to your home. And, I go to home inspections in my area, and just last week I was looking at an apartment where the waterproofing had failed in this old bathroom, And I was really proud of these guys for just leaving it as it is instead of getting the owners to kind of cosmetically sort it out to make people think there weren't any issues. They left it. They said, we want people to know what they're getting and what they're going to have to invest
Remediate, yeah.
and remediate. And I thought that was great. But there are so many people who are just living in these things or renting them out, not knowing that the value of that is just about to hit a sharp decline. And anyone who lives in there over time will also, unfortunately, hit a decline. So, I mean, I know that sounds doom and gloomy, but we have to know so that we can actually go, priority. Mold is bad. I'm going to get someone onto this.
It is doom and gloomy, and I am alarmed, but I am also
sorry.
Oh, no.
I've got tons of resources, so you don't have to feel overwhelmed. I promise.
I'm feeling so excited about your one-page sheet where everything's together. Now, please give us some good news on the ingestible side of things, toxic overload in the foods that we eat, and also some workarounds, and again, some knowledge that will help us make better decisions.
So food, it's like my favorite topic because it's where it all started for me. And I'm so shocked that I got to 28 years old as someone who was half French and had been raised with beautiful food when I visited France and my relatives and then worked for French companies. So I understood joie de vivre. I understood that the food was somehow far more delicious when I visited my aunties in France. But I then I linked good food to holidays. Do you know what I think that was? It was that I linked it to special occasions and holidays. How screwed up is that the good, nutritious food is a special occasion and then the shitty processed food is our day-to-day food?
Such an interesting observation.
What I'm saying is we flip it. And I mean, eventually, of course, we go, not even special occasion because that stuff's crap. But we have to work towards a system where that's flipped and the bulk of our food is beautiful, simple, lovely produce. I remember seeing Neil Perry talking, like, you know, when you'd have a sick day at school, that's how long Neil Perry's been talking about food. I would watch his cooking show at uni or school. You know, I was late teens, I think, when he started doing cooking shows. And I remember him talking about the produce. And I remember that thinking that was really posh and conceited sounding and like almost exclusive.
Yeah.
And
it was elevated, though. It was elevated.
Right.
Organic, you know, farm to table sourced meats, all of that. It's expensive. And therefore there's an elevation, a luxury, and not everyone can access it element to it. You're quite right.
Yeah. And I just, as I grew into learning about food and realizing, if I want to actually be excited about produce, I do have to learn how to cook properly because like overly pan-fried chicken breast with some overly steamed greens that are almost gray and, no butter or salt because they're probably bad for me. Like you sit there eating that thinking, this is a good idea. I'm doing something healthy and you're hating every minute of it. Then that's not going to work. There's no motivation there to go, let's eat simpler. You have to learn to cook. Unless, of course, you're privileged and can just go out to meals most of the time in great places. But you really do have to learn to cook. And I think it was such a gift that I had to do that before the gluten-free processed food options started to come out in the market, because I reckon for most people who don't get the memo on learning how to cook, but do get the memo that they have to go gluten-free or have to go dairy-free because of an identified intolerance, allergy, whatever it is, these days you can go from your packet up and go breakfast popper to the gluten-free version of that processed packet up and go breakfast popper. I couldn't. 20 years ago, there was no option that wasn't gluten-free. So I had to learn how to cook. It was the biggest blessing in disguise because it forced me into the arms of produce because there was literally no other food I could eat. And I realized so many city kids in my generation, Gen X, grew up with either the mum on a career path, which was so exciting, but that meant, you know, the food industry spoke to that mum and said, we've got food, we'll take it off your hands, just buy this, dunk it in the plastic pouches in your saucepans, all that jazz. Or this sort of underlying message that cooking was beneath us in the modern era, and we outsourced cooking because there were far more exciting things to do. And I just think, oh my gosh, is there nothing more wonderful than taking the time to prepare food or receive food from people you love or for people you love, sit around, take your time, chat, connect, and go, wow, thank you, farmers. This is amazing. And really take the time to value the miracle of good food. I just don't think there's a lot more that is more important than that, frankly. And we need to have a cultural shift away from this whole cooking is an inconvenience to your modern busy lifestyle.
It is a massive inconvenience.
Mm,
I of those people who
mm,
really had to fall in love with
me
that
too.
aspect as well.
It
And
was
it's
hard.
say that because there is a friend of Lily's, and her mum is a TV chef who specializes in gluten-free cooking.
Hmm.
And I said to Lily just the other night, I said, this is the first time in my life I have felt inspired to cook everything that Helen de Donatos puts on her TV show and puts in her
Yeah.
cook. She's Greek, and she really just specializes in fresh food and fresh produce. And I was born in France, so I understand, and I'm Iranian by background. And one of my mum's biggest flexes is she doesn't use canned anything. She makes everything from scratch and only uses fresh herbs, fresh beans, fresh meat, everything. And so only recently, and when I say recently, I mean the past month,
Yeah.
I've stumbled across Helen's show on SBS, Helen's cookbooks, because she gifted them to me. And Helen Donatos on YouTube, and she cooks gluten-free meals that are really easy, very appetizing. And so I will add that link as well, because that really inspired me to come out of my absolute hatred of cooking.
Yeah. And you will find the teacher will appear when you start to get the memo that the other way is a bit broken. And
Yes.
and it's just that we were raised that way to think it was an inconvenience. Like I used to dunk lean cuisine packets into my saucepan, you know, talk about soft plastics, and we now know for sure not to do that. But I genuinely think if you can take yourself on a bit of a romantic journey, and if you're not a recipe person, like I kind of learnt traditional cooking through the Larousse gastronomique, and you know I learnt my sauces and my things, but then I left it. I honestly suck at reading recipes. I find that so overwhelming. But if you go, oh, I know if I put onions, carrots, celery, a particular type of spice, about a tablespoon, change up the cuisines, about a kilo of meat, about a kilo of veg, a bit of stock or some water, salt, pepper, and a couple of hours, they will all get married and make something delicious together. And like, you know, you just learn the patterns and then free yourself from having to like go, oh, I need to buy all of this and I need to do it in all these steps. I think that is what is exhausting, this idea that we have to learn recipes. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I do
There's
find
a lot of people who are going to listen to this and go, look, it's a bridge too far. But
yeah.
But I will say, for people like you, because I truly empathize, one of the things that I did learn from living in France is, and I think I've said this before, is I remember on Friday evenings during the summer, friends would invite you to have a picnic with them along the Seine. And the traditional thing to do would be everyone would bring one great thing.
Yes.
So you would bring one great cheese or one beautiful cantaloupe or one wonderful stick of bread or one beautiful bottle of wine. And that romanticism and an understanding that one great thing has provenance, it's been created beautifully, it's to be enjoyed slowly, carefully, in a really curated way. It really inspired me and I mean this quite seriously, to do better grazing type of cooking. I call
Oh,
it the cellular.
100%. My auntie,
So,
French auntie, taught me the same. I
so
always
I
used to be,
assemble like a pro. I can.
yeah, I used to be confounded by the fact that she would just invite all these people around, like 12, 15 people, and not even break a sweat. And
Yes.
everybody would be complimenting her about the amazing spread. And I'd kind of look around and think, huh, you didn't have to cook much here. And I thought that was great. Like in Paris, you can buy the sheets of pastry. So you just layer some tomatoes and fresh basil on top. Boom, that's the tart. A couple of gorgeous cheeses, some good bread. You're so right. It's I think we have to move
Beautiful
away from thinking that cooking or good quality food is this mysterious thing that hides behind chefs and
Yes.
famous people. No. And so fall
So,
in love.
yeah.
Your project is number one, move away from products to produce and do it like little bit by little bit. You don't have to go zero to hero. But, and then think about your snacks and think, oh, could I remove some of the packaged snacks and actually invest more money into decent meals? And then once you're more produce focused, think simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. That's it. It's that simple.
I like that a lot. I mean, we could do a triple episode on this topic.
I know. It's been
And
awesome.
I love speaking to you. I will share the first time we met was at which bar was it?
Oh, it was when I was running Lotus.
Lotus. And you were, oh my God, a mixologist extraordinaire. I think I had the best cocktails of my life with you, and they were so inventive and artistic and beautiful. But more than anything else, you were the most superb hostess and conversation.
Aw.
You ran that back bar like it was your living room, and we all came in and just it was so beautiful. It was such a great time of my life. And so
It
you're
was a
such
great
a
time of my life.
it's so anchored in joy and friendship and conversation and learning. And you would teach us how to make the cocktails as well.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with you on corporate things where you've run workshops, but today was such a joy. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I love that we got to connect and for you to share some of these wonderful insights. I'm going to share that sheet of yours with everyone.
Oh, yeah, I will send you the links. And I hope just everybody remember two things. We do what we do most of the time so we can go with the flow some of the time. This is not a race to perfection or like completely toxic-free living. That doesn't exist. So cut yourself some slack, focus on what you care about, and just go with the flow on the rest. And the second thing is, you didn't know what you didn't know yesterday. And all we can do is actually get excited about something we feel motivation around that we did learn today. Like you say, Bahar, every day is New Year's Day. And just, this is it. This is the start. Forget what you didn't know before.
Well, that is a wonderful way to end it. Super positive and super functional. So I appreciate it so much. Thank you again, darling.
Thank you, Bahar.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the channel, sign up for our free newsletter, and consider leaving a review and rating it. This really helps the channel grow and reach new audiences.